Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. If you are just tuning in, we've just gone over the AL and the NL rosters of the MLB All-Star game that were announced over the weekends. In this segment here, we are going to go over the snubs. There's always a couple snubs, and this year is no different. Although I did think they did a good job with at least the starting lineups, there were a couple of reserves that I think could have gone the other way, and we're going to go through all of them here in just 1 second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Go and throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. But like I was saying, in this segment here, we are going to get into the All-Star snubs. I've been teasing it a little bit in both of these first two segments. So we're going to start off with some of the one of the bigger snubs of them all, the New York Mets shortstop Francisco Lindor. You take a look at a lot of metrics, right? There's a lot of metrics in baseball to decide which players are best, how they're having a good season. You can look at average. You can look at on-base percentage. You can look at on-base plus slugging. You can look at that slugging percentage, that triple slash. But one of those numbers that's nice and concise to look at is WAR, wins above replacement. And if you're talking about getting the top WAR players, Francisco Lindor needs to be in there. And there's been a lot of arguments of whether or not, he could have a spot. Obviously, the way that the MLB works, each team needs to have at least one representative, right? And I think that he probably should have gotten in over C.J. Abrams. And as a Nats fan, I love C.J. Abrams, right? And I think he has played an all-star worthy season. No doubt in my mind does he deserve to be an all-star. But, there were other players on the Nats that could have gotten that nod. And we'll get to them in a second. But Francisco Lindor absolutely deserved to get in here. I mean, you take a look at a guy in Francisco Lindor who might still get in because Mookie Betts is going to be out. But, there's only 40 players that have 2.5 F4. But this is, in such a crowded shortstop market like the NL, you have Trey Turner, right? Who's been awesome. You have Mookie Betts. Those two have been the top two shortstops in the league. Then you have Elly De La Cruz, right? You have Willy Adames of the Brewers. You have C.J. Abrams. You have Francisco Lindor. There's only 3 of those guys that can make it. And really with Mookie Betts and Trey Turner, there was really only one slot for 3 or 4 of those guys. So unfortunately, it's just how it plays out, right? And every team needs to get a player in, and the MLB decided to give that to C.J. Abrams for the Washington Nationals. And I don't mind that. I think he absolutely deserves to get in, but Francisco Lindor is a guy that absolutely should have gotten him. Speaking of that other national, though, you get to pitching on the NL side, and while most of those pitchers have been awesome and deserve to get in, and all of them really do, there is one switch that I would definitely make, and that's Jake Irvin. Not many of you guys might know about Jake Irvin. He is a starting pitcher for the Washington Nationals. He's not a big name, big brand guy, but you take a look at his numbers when compared to a guy like Logan Webb, and they're near identical. It's just a little bit better on his side, right? You have Jake Irvin, who coming off in the NL, where he ranks 4th in ERA at 2.8 ERA, 7th in walk percentage, 21st in strikeout percentage, 10th in WAR. He's got 2.2 WAR so far. He has been incredible for the Nationals. And again, I really do think that that Logan Webb deserved to get in. But again, we'll do a straight stat by stat comparison. They're both 7-6 right now. Uh, the ERA is difference by just about 0.3. Logan Webb has a 309. Jake Irvin has a 2.8. The WHIP is difference by 0.2. Logan Webb has a 1.22. Jake Irvin has a 1 flat. The WAR numbers are near identical. The opponent batting average is about 50 points better for Jake Irvin, and there's just a lot of stats that are very, very close here, right? And I know the Logan Webb is a bigger name, right? And the Giants are a slightly better team than the Nationals are, so they're going to get some of that media priority here. But if I was sitting here, and again, we just had this conversation with Francisco Lindor, I think he should have gotten in. If I'm sitting here and making the decisions, I'm putting Jake Irvin in as a starter, as a pitcher for the All-Star game, and removing CJ Abrams and putting in Francisco Lindor. Now, again, lots of different ways you can go about this, and this is not anything against Logan Webb or CJ Abrams. I think they are both wonderful players that deserved All-Star nods. They really did. But there's always going to be snubs, especially with how good the talent is in the MLB now. There's always going to be snubs, and this is just how it happened to be this year. As far as the another snub goes, in the AL side especially, you have a guy like, excuse me. You have a guy like Jordan Westburg. We talked a lot about the Orioles that weren't getting in there. Jordan Westburg has been awesome. He's been a top 5 third baseman in the league. He's up there in WAR. But you talk about again, league representatives. We talked about Isaac Paredes, who is a good player, right? But he just kind of got left out at third, right? Uh, he was the odd man out. I think he absolutely deserved to get in. I would put him in above Isaac Paredes, but the Rays again needed a representative. So it's not like this is a snub that, if there wasn't that rule, I bet you he would have gotten in. The other Oriole that I think should have gotten in, you talk about Craig Kimbrell. He's been an elite closer for a very long time in the MLB, or at least a very, very good one, very prominent one. He's ahead of all of his career numbers this season. He's been really, really great for the Orioles. They come and bring him in to be their closer, and especially down the stretch here, he's been fantastic for them, shutting down the game. And it's Craig Kimbrell. You know what you get with him. Every once in a while, he's going to blow one just because you're never perfect in the MLB, but he is better than all of his career stats this season, and that is insane to say with a guy that has a Hall of Fame resume already. Craig Kimbrell probably should have been in the All-Star game this season. Another pitcher, and we kind of touched on a little bit in our last segment, Luis Gil from the Yankees. And again, we've talked about how crowded it is at the top in the starting pitching market, but Luis Gil kind of was a revelation for the Yankees, right? He seemed like a lock heading into June, but he's been bad recently. And in his past 3 starts, he's been 0-3 with a 14.9 ERA. He lost an entire point in ERA. He was at 2.03. Now he's down to 3.41. There's still other guys that could have made the list. There's only a couple guys below 3 ERA that didn't make it. We talked about Jake Irvin already. We talked Brady Singer of the Royals would have been their third one. But there's gonna be a couple guys that get missed out, right? And Luis Gil had that incredible start to the season. He just hasn't been able to keep it up. He hit a wall in June, just like really the entirety of the Yankees did. And, I'm not putting him above most over really any of these guys. You can make the argument maybe you put him in over Tanner Houck, but I'm not gonna do that. Uh, I think that they got these pitchers right. They needed to get Tyler Anderson in there from the Angels. Again, with the way that baseball works, with the automatic, you get a guy in every single time, which is a good thing for the game, right? You get representation from all 30 ball clubs, but it's there's always going to be snubs because of it, and you can't make too big of a fuss a lot of the time because you say, hey, they didn't have a choice. They had to put this guy in. They had to get a representative from this team. But again, I think they did a pretty solid job. There's a couple guys I would switch. I think Jake Urban should get in there. I think Francisco Lindor should get in there. And maybe Francisco Lindor should just straight up replace Pete Alonso. I don't think Pete Alonso, he was the lone Mets representative. I don't think he was the best Met. But that's just positionally how it goes in the All-Star game, at least right now. But anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on this team. Let me know who you thought were snubs. If you think the MLB got it right, who the biggest snub is in the league. I'd love to hear from you guys. But in our next segment, we were moving away from the world of baseball. We were getting into some basketball. There was a major sign-in trade that took place this weekend between the Kings, the Bulls, and the Spurs involving DeMar DeRozan. We will go over all of that, all of the moving pieces, and what that means for all of those teams involved. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.